Today is the biggest day of my entire life. We're going to start reassembling this 1999 Kawasaki KE100. Warning, this video does contain some butchery, shady, and sloppy mechanic work. For those of you who think of me as a mechanical father figure or genius when it comes to working on motorbikes, I'm very sorry to disappoint. For all of my trolls out there, now is your time to shine. Here Max is putting the crankshaft into what is called a bench center. Now we're turning the crank and we have dial indicators on each of the weights of the crankshaft, and both of these weights were out 0.03 of an inch. They had a high spot on them. You can see here there are two lines that's indicating the high spot on those weights. Next we wanted to check where the bearing journals went, and we found that one side was 1/1000th of an inch high, or kind of maybe not out of round but off center, I guess you would say. Because the high spot was located nearly directly where the pin was, no adjustment could be made. Even if we did make an adjustment, what we would have had to do was split the difference, and it would have been 0.5 out on each side instead of 1/1000 out on one side. Many thanks goes out to my buddy Max, who is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to machine work and engineering. To be clear, this crankshaft has no issues. The 0.03 that the weights are off is normal. That's the way it's manufactured. The 1/1000th of an inch that the crankshaft is off center is also no issue. It's well within specs. This bearing has to go in perfectly straight in order for this to work. There you go. You see how I just gently wiggled it down? If you try forcing it, you'll bind it up. It'll get crooked. And look how hot this is. Ow! That's how long it takes me, look. Ow! That's how long I can keep my hands on there. What I'm showing you is it's not terribly, terribly hot. It's probably about 200 degrees or so. Pay attention to which way that plate goes in. It's beveled on one side. The beveled side here goes up to fit these screws. Don't like the way that's fitting. At this point I should have stopped, carefully removed the bearing, and figured out what was wrong. It was either not hot enough or started on crooked or something. Something was wrong. Instead I decided to drive it on home, which was really a bad decision. So there's stupid and then there's extra stupid. This would fit in the extra stupid category. I wasn't able to clean up the other side in there because I didn't want to take all the gears and stuff out. But I was able to clean this one up, so why not just throw it in the machine? I did of course clean the other one, but just with brake clean. Remember this little ball bearing I thought was part of the crankshaft bearing? It's not. This is why you always have to do your research. It fits right here. So I'm going to get some grease and put on there to make sure it stays in place. I would prefer to put the silicone on the other case, but I have to heat it up where the bearing goes, so I don't want to dry the silicone out. So we'll just have to do it on this side. Little paintbrush for even disbursement of the silicone. We'll install a couple seals while we're here. I kind of spin them so you can feel the lip so it doesn't fold over. You don't want the lip to fold over. Motorbikes are pretty easy. You just push them on in there carefully and evenly. This is something that drives me crazy. All the seals are correct except one of them in the kit. That just drives me nuts. So I have to find one. And this seal, I'll show you where it goes. It fits right here, or is supposed to fit right there, but it's the wrong size. Now to install the stator and or stator. It's all according to how you spell it. I noticed while trying to install this stator and or stator that it's not fitting exactly right. You need to take time, because if you put something like this crooked and you tighten it down, you're going to crack or break something. So take your time, make sure everything's just exactly so before you go tightening screws down. Interesting fit here. This is very tight in that case. Woodruff key, fly wheel, lock washer and nut, torque to spec. Eventually I was able to repair this neutral switch thingy, and if you'll remember, we did talk about this at the beginning of the video. This would've, could've, and should've been avoided by simply removing this one screw before I started to try and split the cases. That was careless, and this thing just sticks up and broke off. Also, the proper way to repair it would be to replace it, but we're not taking that route right now, maybe later down the road. YouTube is a great resource to use as a guide, but when you're repairing something, you need to always consult the manual. Next, this little spacer we'll put on there for where the sprocket goes. And I spun it a little bit. There's an O-ring that fits on top of that. Right there. There's a groove in the bushing. Our sprocket. And again, torque to spec. Ow! This is a little lock washer, and it needs to be bent up to hold that bolt from backing off. Good enough for who it's for. Flop her over and have a look at the other side. I think this little white sprocket fits here. I think it drives the oil pump, perhaps. It would appear as though this goes next on the Kickstarter. There's a hole in the shaft here. And another hole in the case. I'll drop that in there. Looks good to me. That was a terrible illustration on how to install the kickstart spring. To do it correctly, the shaft needs to be turned all the way in a position like with a Kickstarter all the way up. Then when you put your spring on, there'll be a little tension on it. You'll have to turn it a little bit to get it in the slot. The plastic collar that fits inside of the spring has an indentation that goes towards the case. I could not forgive myself if I misled you folks. Our shift shaft. See if we can figure out how that goes. That seems reasonable. Our little pin. When I tried to push it in, it kept springing out because there's air behind it and the oil was making a seal. Isn't that funny? Rotary drive gear. oil, rotary, let me change this seal out real quick right here. A nice new seal installed. Now for the O-ring. If you are a very panicky person, please don't. This will only fit one way because it has pins on 2 locations, here and here. The rotary valve can be installed backwards. If you put it in wrong, the thing won't run. As the piston's going down, the rotary valve should close off the intake. As the piston's going up, the rotary valve should open up the intake port. Be sure to check that out before you go putting this thing all back together. Next, our little spacer here. An O-ring, and this one is a thicker diameter than the one that fits in front of the sprocket gear. Give her a little turn, make sure everything's smooth like butter. Woodruff key, drive gear, lock nut, and you have to line it up with a little hole there. Lock plate, I meant, and now nut. Washer, clutch spring, clutch basket, remember there's 2 prongs underneath here. You need to line it up right and make sure when the spring is down, these are level right here, the gears, the drive gear and the clutch gear, clutch basket gear. Washer, clutches, little washer, snap ring, chisel, little ball platey thing, little piece that fits on rotary cover, new O-ring, another new O-ring, new clutch push rod seal right here. It goes right here. I'm going to replace that real quick. Some assembly lube on my gasket here. May help it to seal better. Also make it reusable possibly one time. Clutch cover. For my weirdo detailed oriented viewers, yes, I did replace the kickstart seal. If I were to give you only one sound good piece of advice, what would it be? It would be never force things together. When you're assembling a motorbike, don't be hammering on it and banging on it and trying to force it together. This also holds true with life in general. You should never have to force anything. Things should always just naturally ease and settle into place on their own. Oil pump, and I am reusing the old gasket. That's alright. Too much trouble to clean, and the old one's still in good shape, in my humble opinion. And on this end there is a bolt and a washer and a washer. Our properly lubed clutch mech, and I did not change the gasket on that one either. Why, you might ask? I don't know. Don't feel like it. That's it for this side. That's as far as we can go until it's on the bike. Our new piston comes in this fancy bag. Check that out. Is that not nice or what? This is a Wesco piston, high quality stuff. Installing the rings, remember there's a little pin where the rings have to line up with on a 2-stroke so that they don't move. You don't want to move the gap because of the way the fuel enters into the fuel system. The piston has an arrow. It always points towards the front of the engine. Now for the C-clips, there's two of them. One fits on this side of the pin, one fits on the other. I'm not going to be recording that. Let me put them in real quick. Our base gasket. Check your rings one more time. Make sure they're lined up with the pin. I attempted to install the piston, but it was too big. I didn't even check it. I should have. It's too big in diameter. I think maybe it's a 20 thousandths oversized piston. What a debacle this assembly has become. And as you can hear outside, it's raining. That's pretty appropriate for this video. I now need to order another piston, so we'll have to wait till that comes in before we can finish this up. I do have 2 other videos on this motorbike, so I'm going to go ahead and make a playlist for it. I'll leave it in the description below. So we're up to this is part 3. Although this has been quite the ordeal, I've still been having a good time. Thanks for sticking with me, guys. We'll see you next time.